Hello everyone and welcome back to part 4 on weather decision making in Microsoft Flight Sim 2024. So then guys, we're going to look at the weather data that we've been looking at for the last few episodes, and we're going to turn that into actual decisions when flying. So the goals here is going to look at how METARs affect flying and what decisions we need to make like a VATSIM pilot. So what does it tell you? Obviously a weather report are not just information, they tell you what you can do and what you can't do. So can I take off safely and can I land safely? They're the most two important questions when looking at weather information. So then the wind and the runway. As we mentioned in the previous video, pilots always land into the wind. So with this example here, we've got runway 09 and runway 27. So let's just say that the wind is currently 090 at 15 knots, just for simplicity. So which runway actually should we land on? So obviously, like we say, we fly into the wind. So actually we would use runway 27 for landing. And the reason for that is because if you have a tailwind, that's likely to increase your speed on approach, which then means you're going to use more runway and then risks running off the end of the runway. Whereas if you're flying into the wind, that's also going to help slow you down. So you may need a little bit more thrust to get you down safely, but also it allows, if you need to do a go around, it increases the amount of lift that you produce, and also will reduce the amount of runway length and help you with stopping on the runway. So then visibility and your approach type. So if you see on your METAR that you have a 1 kilometer visibility, obviously that is quite low. So this means that when you're conducting an approach, you're most likely in this situation need to conduct an instrument landing system approach, an ILS approach, because you're not going to be able to see the runway to obviously maintain the right angle of attack for the runway. However, ILS systems also have certain limitations, and they're restricted by a couple of different things, so such as a RVR, so a runway visual range, and sometimes you'll see that on an ATIS. If the weather's really low, there'll be an RVR figure there, and it will tell you what the runway visual range is. Another thing that they're also limited by is the minimum. So you'll often hear me on my videos and streams talking about minimums and saying continue. So at that point is the point of no return. So if we cannot see the runway when we are at minimums, we must conduct a go around. That is a pure safety procedure because that is therefore not safe. However, this does depend on the type of ILS system. So some ILS systems will allow you to do a Cat 3 auto land, in which case you can go down to really short visibility. So to keep it simple, obviously the lower the visibility, the higher your workload is going to be as a pilot. And you'll see me not talk very much in some of my streams if the approach is quite difficult. And that is that exact reason, because my workload's really high, trying to work out exactly where that point of the runway that we need to contact is, making sure at the right altitude and ensuring that we're not going to either miss the runway, overshoot the runway, and also considering around a go-around. We are going to do another series, I think, on go-arounds, the different types of go-arounds and how to actually conduct them within the flight sim. I'm no expert, so we can learn all this together. Next thing to think about is your cloud ceiling. So in the METAR, if it says that the clouds are broken at 008, so that is 800 feet, which is obviously very low. So that tells me that I'm going to need to do an ILS approach until I can see the runway after that 800 feet margin. After the 800 feet margin, you can disconnect and then obviously fly manually. But it just gives you a really good heads up to think, actually, we're not going to have to see a lot here on this approach, and we need to be really careful with this approach. So obviously the lower the clouds, the less time you get to see the runway to adjust. So obviously that's where your ILS systems will come in very handy, or RNAV approaches will come in very handy in situations like this. Most of the time, especially in the UK, the cloud base is fairly good, but there are times where the cloud is really rubbish, especially we go up to Scotland quite a lot, to Edinburgh and to Inverness. The cloud there can be horrendous sometimes, and you can't see anything until you're like 100 foot off the runway. But that is just how it goes sometimes. But that is another really important thing to consider around cloud ceiling. So weather conditions, obviously we've looked at the different types of weather codes. That is something that we do need to consider. So obviously rain and showers is going to reduce your visibility to the runway. Same with fog, you're going to have a serious issue with visibility down to meters. And sometimes even taxiing can be a major issue. And that is something you've got to be really, really careful about. And obviously this also affects how stable your approach is going to be. If you can't see a lot, your approach is not going to be as stable as if you can see the full runway length. So putting it all together, obviously this METAR here, this tells me, so the wind at the moment is 090 degrees at 18 knots, gusting up to 28. And that is telling me here, so we are having really strong wind gusts with low visibility and low clouds. And that is going to indicate that we are going to have a hugely challenging approach. And that is one of the things that you need to consider. It's really about thinking ahead and thinking, actually, what are we going to see on landing? And then that allows you to prepare a little bit for your approach. So if you think that the cloud is going to be really challenging, there's a good chance you're going to have a go around. So make sure you've looked at the go around procedure for that airport, and then you're really one step ahead. So if that does happen, like it happened to me literally 2 days ago in the sim, where we wasn't stable for the approach, we had a huge sudden down gust and it pushed us down to the runway, and we was at 20 feet nowhere near the runway, and we had to perform a go around. And because I'd looked at that chart, I knew exactly I need to climb straight ahead to 3,000 feet and then make a right turn to 185 degrees and then come back round. And it just allows you to prepare so much easier. So I don't stress this enough. Always check your missed approach procedures, especially if you're seeing weather like this. So obviously, if you saw this approach from this picture, what would you think? Would you think we can go around? Would we continue? What sort of your thought process? I would imagine if the visibility was that reduced, we would probably be in a full auto land setting. So we would probably continue if we was in an auto land function, but then be very, very prepared to go around, because even with the auto land, sometimes you may not hit the runway at the right spot. Things could happen. There could be traffic on the runway still. It makes things a lot more difficult. So obviously, if you were flying this manually, which I would like to hope you're not flying this manually at this point, there's a good chance at this point you'd probably be going around, to be quite honest with you. Like you say, you can just make out the runway, but it's not strong enough really to see the full runway effects. We can just see the threshold lights there and then green lights. But we still can't even see the centerline lights, maybe vaguely see the centerline lights. But to be honest, I think at this point, if I was flying this manually, I would be going around 100%. So, talking about VATSIM, as you guys know, I fly on VATSIM very, very regularly. And people think about VATSIM and think it's really scary. It can be a bit scary when you first start, but actually, it's not. It's all about realism. That is all that VATSIM is about, is realism. And if you try your hardest to work out, I'm no expert, I still make mistakes 10 years after being on VATSIM. And this is what makes flying really realistic, because the controllers will make decisions based upon the weather and separation and things like that. It is something that they will definitely utilise. And it's really, really helpful, to be honest. So one thing I would say as a tip overall for Flight Sim 2024, so you keep checking for your METAR updates and keep following them. Check your charts, make sure that your charts are all up to date. I use Navigraph. I can't fault Navigraph enough. Yes, there is a subscription. I think it's around £9 a month, which, to be honest, is a small price to pay with what you get out of it. I use them every single flight. They come in so handy. It integrates into the Phoenix. There's so many good things. I'm not sponsored by them at all, but I really love their products. They're so good. Obviously, don't ignore the wind or the visibility, and think like a pilot overall. So think, what am I actually going to see upon this landing? Just take one extra step to actually think about what's going to happen, because that way you'll make really safe decisions as well, and you'll be prepared for pretty much everything. That would be sort of my advice. So guys, thank you very much for watching this METAR and TAF series. I hope this has been really helpful for you. It has actually been helpful for me conducting it. I've learnt loads of different little caveats whilst conducting it. Don't forget to download our quick start guide. It's completely free of charge. Head over to the Discord, link in the description below. And most importantly, don't forget to give us a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you've got any questions whatsoever, feel free to ask and I'll try and answer them the best I can. Like I say, I'm not a real world pilot. I'm a simulator pilot, but I do try and keep things to real world. But if I can get the answer for you, I've got a few contacts out there who are real world pilots, which may be able to answer some of the questions as well. So feel free to please ask me anything. And obviously, if you've got any other suggestions for tutorials that we could do, feel free to drop them in the comments, or drop me a message directly over on Discord or on YouTube, whichever. And I hope you've enjoyed these videos and they've not been too laborious. I've tried to make them as interesting as possible, but like I say, it is quite a dry subject overall. Thank you and take care.